Hello, you're watching Zee Business. I'm Piyush Srivastava. Overcoming Republican resistance, the U.S. House of Representatives finally passed the fiscal cliff bill by 257 to 167 votes on Tuesday, ending a dramatic New Year's Day showdown over income taxes and deep federal spending cuts. U.S. House of Representatives have finally passed the fiscal cliff bill by 257 to 167 votes, ending a dramatic New Year's Day showdown over income tax and deep federal spending cuts.
America has averted economic calamity as lawmakers have approved a deal preventing huge tax hikes and spending cuts that would have pushed the world's largest economy off the fiscal cliff into recession, ending a months-long battle.
A central premise of my campaign for president was to change the tax code that was too skewed towards the wealthy at the expense of working middle-class Americans. Tonight, we've done that. Thanks to the votes of Democrats and Republicans in Congress, I will sign a law that raises taxes on the wealthiest 2% of Americans while preventing a middle-class tax hike that could have sent the economy back into recession and obviously had a severe impact on families all across America.
The motion is adopted without objection. A motion to
Approval of the
reconsider
bill is
laid
a
on the
big
table.
victory for President Obama, who campaigned for re-election last November on a promise to raise taxes on the wealthiest, but faced stiff competition from the Republicans.
While we share the same goals, we sometimes have different paths to achieving them. And reconciling our differences was a monumental task, especially with the time growing short.
House Speaker John Boehner and other Republican House leaders stayed silent during the debate, an unusual move for a major vote. Boehner backed the deal while many of his top lieutenants voted against it. The deal shatters 2 decades of Republican anti-tax orthodoxy by raising rates on the wealthiest. Bureau Report, Zee Business.
And the U.S. President Barack Obama has hailed the passage of the fiscal cliff deal by Congress, saying he has fulfilled a campaign promise to make the United States tax system fairer with a deal to avert the fiscal cliff crisis.
The motion is adopted without objection.
U.S. President Barack Obama has said that an effort to change the nation's tax code that was too skewed towards the wealthy had been achieved with the fiscal deal approved in the Congress. He further added that the House vote to prevent a mix of tax increases and spending cuts avoided a problem that could have sent the economy back into recession.
Thanks to the votes of Democrats and Republicans in Congress, I will sign a law that raises taxes on the wealthiest 2% of Americans while preventing a middle-class tax hike that could have sent the economy back into recession and obviously had a severe impact on families all across America.
Obama said that the deficit was still too high and warned that he will not negotiate with the Congress over another increase in the nation's debt ceiling. The House approved Senate-backed legislation preventing middle-class tax increases and spending cuts that technically took effect with the new year. It represented a triumph for Obama after he campaigned for re-election on higher taxes on the wealthy.
I will not have another debate with this Congress over whether or not they should pay the bills that they've already racked up through the laws that they passed.
For all the struggle involved in the legislation, even its passage would merely clear the way for another round of controversy, almost as soon as the new Congress convenes. With the Treasury expected to need an expansion in borrowing authority and funding authority for most government programs set to expire in late March, Republicans have made it clear they intend to use those events as leverage with the administration to win savings from the Medicare healthcare program, for the elderly and another government benefit programs. Bureau Report, Zee Business.
Well, so the president believes that the crisis is finally over. But the big question remains, is it really over or he just bought a small time? To know more on this, we have a very special guest today with us, Mr. Sunil Sinha, a known economist in India. He is also principal economist at Fiscal. Mr. Sinha, thank you very much for joining us. So, what do you think? The crisis is actually over?
Well, if you look at the overall scheme of things, where it stands, then it is quite obvious that with the passage of this bill, I mean, basically, U.S. has bought some time, but overall, the situation has just got postponed by you can say 2 months, and it'll again come up for discussion. So in that sense, the problem is not over, but yes, the crisis has been averted.
So, but the question remains: what government gonna do now?
Well, obviously, as we have seen that this is a situation where there has been a very hard, bargain between the two leading parties of U.S. So that will continue, and eventually some decision would emerge. But for the time being, what has happened is that firstly the crisis have been averted, and secondly that what is becoming more and more apparent is that on these critical issues, consensus is somewhere eluding the U.S. Political parties. As a consequence of which, last year also we saw that in case of raising the limit for the fiscal deficit, the decision was reached at the last moment. Even now, in this case, it has been reached at the last moment, which is not as a decision that ultimately impacts the economy, but is taken by the politicians is concerned.
So you mean obviously it's not a moment to cheer about this deal, but the government need to take few more corrective measures. So if we can expect few more corrective measures from the United States government, what are they going to be?
Well, I mean, you see, the issue is that some of the contentious issues have been discussed, and somewhere there has been some consensus. Say, for example, raising the taxes for the rich. Similarly, healthcare related issues is still pending. So some bit of discussion, some bit of consensus has been reached, but some bit of it is still eluding. Within these 2 months, one can only expect that the U.S. politicians will put their heads together and come up with a solution which is a kind of midway and beneficial for lifting the mood in the economy.
So you believe that the president have to take some tough measures in coming days, and government have to cut down couple of federal spending?
Well, I mean, it's a give and take situation. Obviously, neither the Republican nor the Democrats can have their way in terms of what they would like, in terms of their wishes. So somewhere the compromise will be reached, as it has been reached, because I mean, say for example, the tax rates for the people who are earning $400,000 or more, their tax rates have gone up from roughly around 34-35% to about 39-40%. So similarly, on the case of what should be done with the healthcare spending, they will arrive at some consensus or some decision which in a way will be somewhat middle path.
Great, and we can see U.S. stock are already cheering up on this issue. Let's take a small break and we'll continue our discussion after a small break. Welcome back. US stocks are all set to rally as Congress clings budget deal to avoid automatic tax hikes and deep spending cuts. However, a word of caution has been placed by the analysts and experts, seeing the current scenario more in this report.
US stocks are poised for gains to begin the year after the late passage of a bill to avoid harsh tax hikes that would have hit most Americans and trimmed economic growth. Many investors are likely to be happy with the portion of the agreement that deals with tax rates on dividends, which are now set to rise to 20%, which would produce some demand for dividend-paying stocks. However, harsh reality awaits any euphoria that comes from avoiding the fiscal cliff. In 2 months, battles over further spending cuts and in particular, the US federal debt limit will come to a head. Market strategists forecast that even the deal approved would reduce economic growth by as much as 1% in 2013. Much of this would come from rise in payroll taxes that would affect majority of American households. Even as this battle recedes, markets will look ahead to another fight in the next few months, this time over whether Congress will approve an increase in the US debt ceiling. Markets have been less volatile, largely because the effects of the spending cuts and tax hikes will be gradual, and there was an ongoing expectation that a retroactive fix was in the offing. Even if the debt ceiling and budget cuts are resolved in March, politicians could put off any long-time answer to the rising fiscal deficit, which is most worrisome for the markets. Bureau Report, Zee Business.
And as the Congress passed the fiscal cliff deal, ending fear of tax hikes among a vast majority of Americans, US President Barack Obama resumed his Hawaii vacation. The Republican-controlled US House of Representatives voted 257 to 167 on the fiscal cliff bill that was passed by the Senate in wee hours of Tuesday.
It's time for New Year celebration for US President Barack Obama. Time to party and relax. The most contentious fiscal cliff bill approval came as a New Year gift to Barack Obama, as he leaves White House to continue with his vacation in Hawaii with the First Lady and his 2 daughters. Earlier, Obama had cut short his vacation on December 26 to oversee the negotiation of the deal. The lawmakers finally managed to seal the fiscal cliff deal to avoid driving the United States over the so-called fiscal cliff with the vote on Tuesday. The House of Representatives passed the emergency legislation to prevent deep spending cuts and even bigger tax hikes from taking effect. The bill has been sent to President Barack Obama to be signed into law. Months-long standoff over fiscal policy, however, has taken its toll, adding uncertainty that has discouraged consumers from spending and businesses from hiring and investing. Also, the fighting seems sure to persist even after Republican-controlled House of Representatives went along with a partial fix. But many see this law as a one more step in the broader effort to strengthen the US economy. Bureau Report, Zee Business.
So the president resumed his holidays, but the big question remains. Mr. Sinha, still with us. Mr. Sinha would like to know, what does it mean for the rest of the world?
Well, at the moment, one of the biggest worries for the world was that if it doesn't, achieve some kind of a consensus, then particularly the financial market would have, gone into a kind of a tizzy. So with this passage of the bill, at least the financial markets are breathing easy. So over the next, say, 1.5 months, at least one can, expect less turmoil in the financial market, which obviously in a globally integrated world even impacts a country like India.
No, obviously we can look at the Indian stock markets. The markets are already changing up. The market is not all-time high, but high of last 2 years, and the US market and European markets are also trading in green at this hour also. But the big question remains. I mean, obviously we were expecting that there will be some kind of a conclusion between both the houses. But the big question remains: the kind of conclusion they came up and the kind of solution they just came up with. Do you think that's sustainable?
As I said earlier, you see, everything has not been put to the rest. Only few issues have been sorted out, and also the fact that the healthcare issue remains, and the fact that these issues would once again come up for discussion within 2 months simply means that the problem has, I mean, you have just bought some time to mull over the issues and maybe thrash out the differences, so that at least when once again you reconvene to discuss these issues, probably better solution or better compromise emerges, and that can then become somewhat more.
Do you think that the government still has to go for some deep spending cuts?
Perhaps yes. Perhaps yes, because I still don't understand that unless and until some level of fiscal consolidation takes place, how will they avoid the fiscal deficit limit which US economy has almost reaced?
See, Mr. Sinha, the biggest cause of worry, because the kind of estimates were there, like if the government failed to avoid the cliff, then they have to cut. There was an automatic cut of $600 billion. So now the big question remains, because if you look at the American economy, the kind of expansion, the kind of military expansion they have, the kind of military expenditure they have, it's simply impossible for them to cut down $600 billion in spending. So if they have to go for a deep cut, so what especially which are the sectors you think they're going to be?
Let me look at this whole question this way. That the fiscal deficit of US economy has there is a debt ceiling which is roughly around $16.3 trillion. Now that debt limit has already been reached. So, and at the same time the President Obama is saying that he would not go back to the Senate to increase that limit. On the other hand, if you are not going to cut your expenditure, then how are you going to manage the economy, because the limit has already been reached.
And the big question still remains, and how it's going to affect India. Well, if you look at the current crisis, the consumer businesses and financial market have been rattled by the months of a standoff between the lawmakers to seal emergency legislation to avert the crisis. And now, with House of Representatives passing the fiscal cliff deal, clearing the air of crisis, world's third largest growing economy, India is poised to gain considerable mileage out of it. More details in this report.
United States has averted economic calamity on Tuesday when lawmakers approved the deal to prevent the huge tax hikes and spending cuts that would have pushed the world's largest economy into the worst recession. With fiscal cliff bill sent to Obama to be signed into law, the partial fix will surely help India to gain considerable mileage as far as the Indian exports are concerned. Now, keeping in view the growing Indian export market, approval of the fiscal cliff deal comes as a big respite for India's exporters. India is no exception. United States, which accounts for a quarter of the world economy, is one of India's largest export markets. The deal will surely boost India's exports, which have been shrinking for the last few months in the wake of weak shipment orders from both the US and Europe. The stronger exports will also strengthen the Indian rupee that is still hovering around record lows. Now, moving on to the US labour market, the deal will certainly pave way for more job creation across the US. With India being a major IT player, the deal is expected to boost employment opportunities in India's ever-expanding BPO sector, which has a major chunk of operations and business activity in the United States. The deal also resolves for now the question of whether Washington can overcome deep ideological differences to avoid harming an economy that is only now beginning to pick up steam after having faced the worst crisis ever in the last few years. Bureau Report, Zee Business.
Mr. Sinha, the deal is finally, the crisis is finally averted. So where do we stand right now, and what kind of impact we can see, a long-term impact and also a short-term impact on India?
Well, so far as long-term impact is concerned, obviously we will have to wait and see as to what happens 2 months from hence. However, on the short run, I mean, this is also the time when, typically the FIIs, do their portfolio adjustment and then start investing in various markets. So, because the fiscal, a crisis have been averted in United States, and there is a breathing space available to, the financial market. At least the FII flows, which have been pretty steady in the last couple of months. I mean, particularly after the reforms measure were announced in India, will continue in the same spirit.
At least for next 2 months. At least for next 2 months. But the big question remains.
Absolutely.
And the big question remains: what will happen after 2 months? We'll definitely keep a watch on it. Thank you very much, Mr. Sinha, for joining us. That's all on this special news. Thank you very much for watching us.
Thank you.